Alrighty, I think, yeah, okay, we're filming. Hello, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new here. Today I have a fun little reading wrap-up video for you guys. I have not filmed one of these in a couple months, so this is going to be everything that I read in November and December. I did quite a bit of reading. I read, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I read 7 books, I believe. So I'm really excited. I hope you guys enjoy this video. I've been enjoying doing more like reading content and that kind of thing. So if you guys enjoy this, please let me know. Feel free to subscribe and also like this video. It helps me out a lot. And as always, if you guys have any book recommendations, please let me know. I'm a big fantasy and romantasy reader. Those are like the 2 things that I'm like really into currently. But any recommendations and everything is welcomed as always. And let me know what you guys think about these books if you've read them before. And let's go ahead and get started. As always, I am going to do my best to make this spoiler free. I'm going to give as many details as I can without spoiling like the whole plot, what happens and that kind of thing. So if there are any spoilers in this, I will give you like a warning and tell you when to skip time wise. But let's go ahead and do a recap. I'm going to give you guys a real quick summary of how I'm gonna rate these books on a scale of 1 to 5 stars. 1 star is I burn it, I hate it, this is the worst thing I've ever read. 2 stars being it's okay, but I wouldn't read it again and I wouldn't recommend it and it was kind of crap. 3 stars is it's average, it's okay. Like I'm not in love with it, but I also don't hate it. I just feel meh, whatever. It's just very bland. 4 stars is I loved it, I would recommend it. I will read it again. I really enjoyed it. Yada yada. 5 stars is like, this is God tier. This is one of the best things I've ever read in my life. This made me feel all the feelings that I wanted it to. It couldn't have been perfect. So 5 stars is reserved solely for perfect books. And then 4 stars is like as close to perfect as you can get. But I still think that there's like little things that you could have changed, if that makes sense. So there is a difference between 4 and 5 stars for me. Some of these have a 4.5 star review, and that means that it got pretty close to perfect, but there were just minor things that I would have changed and tweaked. But that is the review system that I have. I'm gonna go ahead and start, I think, in order of when I read these books, beginning to most recent. So the first books that I read were part of a series called the Lightlark Saga. I started Lightlark, I read the first book at the end of October, and I really, really like that book. I gave it, I think, 4 or 4.5 stars. I think it's probably closer to like a 4 star for me now that I've been reading more. I really enjoyed Lightlark, and I love the world that it's in and the romance aspect. It is like a love triangle-esque situation between 2 characters and the main character, Isla. At first I did not like her character. I'm going to be completely honest with you. She just kind of annoyed me. I wasn't loving it. But as I went on, I ended up really liking her. I really love the character development in these books as well. And I think it talks about like a lot of trauma and just like heavier topics, but in a very digestible way. Like I don't think you have to be like an excellent reader to comprehend these books by any means. So I really like the Lightlark book, their first one. So far there were 4 books. But I went ahead and read the second one then, which is Nightbane. I would rate this one like a 3 star. I really wasn't obsessed with like the concepts of the book. I really love the fact that it is dual POV. I do appreciate that. Well, it's not dual, I take that back. This one I don't think is the dual POV. I think that was the 3rd and 4th one. But I really like the fact that this one goes to before the things that happened in the first book and then the current day. I do really like that. And I like the fact that it has a lot more of one of the characters that she's in a love triangle with in this book and talks about that relationship and the memories that she didn't have in the first one and that kind of thing, and shows you just a lot more details. And so I did like this book, but wasn't obsessed with it. It was just kind of meh, whatever for me. But I did want to continue reading the series because this one does, each book leaves on a cliffhanger, and so it leaves you obviously needing to read the second one is how you feel. And so from there, this one was 3 stars for me. I read Sky Shade. This one actually ended up being my favorite in the series. This is another, I would say, 4 star for me. I really enjoyed it and I really just love the direction that it took. and I loved the development of side characters in this book, as well as things like the dragons and other characters in it. And like, I feel like the fantasy world really developed and it connected a lot from the first couple books into this book. So this one I think was the best written and like executed, in my opinion. I know it's funny because I went on Goodreads to go review after I read it, and a lot of people feel the opposite. I think for me, and it's funny because this one is actually is one of the highest rated ones of the saga. This one was one of my least favorites out of the entire thing. I read all 4 books. This one was my second to least favorite. I found it very bland and kind of boring at times, and I feel like it just didn't add quite enough for me. Even though it does have more romance in it, it finally like starts to pick up in this book. I just wasn't obsessed with it. I felt like it was missing something and it just wasn't doing it for me. Whereas I feel like the 3rd book finally got to that stuff that I feel like the 2nd one was missing. And so I guess I feel like the series, in a sense, is kind of drug out for longer than I feel like it needs to be. And so for me, I started to lose interest, whereas this book kind of like recovered that and tied it all in. It was a lot faster paced, which I appreciate. And then because I liked this one, I was like excited to read the 4th one. And the 4th one just came out in November. No, I think it came out in December, maybe. It came out December 4th, I believe. Which I did pre-order it. I got it. I was looking forward to reading this guy. This for me is a 2-star. I did not like this book at all. I was really, really disappointed because I feel like after reading Skyshade, it had a lot of potential, and so I was really looking forward to that, and I was really excited to read this. This is the slowest paced, most boring book I have read in a while. It is so bland and so boring. All of the characters are giving absolutely nothing. Like, and I'm sorry, like, I don't like saying that about books, and I feel bad to say that because I feel like I'm dissing an author. And I think Alex Aster is a really talented author. If you saw my last video wrap up, I talked highly of her, and I really do think that she does a really good job at world building and character development. I just did not see any of that in this. It feels like a completely different book to me. The characters aren't giving any of the energy that they had in any of the other books. Like, they're giving absolutely nothing. It is so bland, so boring. The plot of this book, like the direction that it took, could have been so good, but it did not take that turn. It is so bland and so boring. So I gave it 2 stars. In my opinion, if I could go back in time, I would recommend stopping at Skyshade. Even though it does leave off on a cliffhanger, I think I would have been happier. And I unfortunately didn't. Because I did not enjoy this book, I only made it to page 159, and it took me a week to read that because I only read like the first, like maybe third, maybe just over a third of it, because I could not do it. It was so painfully bad. And just bland and boring. And again, the characters in this book were bothering me. Like, I really like the characters in like the rest of the series. Like, I like them. I was annoyed by them in this book. Like, it genuinely pissed me off. So I don't recommend this book. In my opinion, I would recommend stopping at this one. And from what I've heard, this book was supposed to be the last in the series, and she actually ended up leaving it. As far as I know, she ended up making another one, so it's going to be an even longer series. I unfortunately, even though I really liked the first book and the 3rd book, I don't see myself continuing this saga. I don't think it's worth it for me. And I can't say I recommend doing that. I think it's just been drug out for too long. Like, I don't think a series needs to be doing that, especially when the plot isn't developing enough to keep up with that. It just isn't worth it to me. So I don't, as far as Light Lark series goes, read the first 3, stop it at that. It's over, it's done. Just leave it at that. But that is my review for those books. Next up, it's funny because after reading Crown Tide, I was in quite a bit of a rut because it took me forever to get through that, and then I didn't even complete the book, and I was just kind of lost motivation. I was like, that was the most boring thing I've read in a minute. So I was like, okay, what do I read after that? And that's when I picked up Quicksilver, which I'm gonna do these ones. This next one's a little out of order because what happened is Quicksilver, I read Quicksilver because the second book in the series, Brimstone, was set to come out in a couple weeks, which it did, but then I finished this book and I still had time before the second one came out, so in between those I read a different book. So I'm going to do both of these back to back, even though I didn't read them back to back, just because I think it'll make more sense before I jump into the next two books that I read. So the next book that I read was Quicksilver, which I loved this book. This to me, I would say is like, I want to say like a 4.5 star. It's not absolutely perfect, but it is pretty dang close to perfect. I think on Goodreads I gave it a 5 star because you can't give half stars on there, at least I don't think you can, not that I figured out how to do it. I did give this one in my opinion 4.5 stars. I think if you're not into like smut and that's not for you, don't read this book. Or you could skip those chapters, to be honest. You can look it up ahead of time and still read it. I think this book is just fun. Like, it's not like something that like makes you emotional. You're not gonna cry reading this, but it is just like a fun experience, the fantasy world, and this is really fun. Like, you get fays, you get soldiers, you get alchemists, you get so many different characters, and I think it's really well written, in my opinion. It's not something that's gonna like change the world by any means, but it's just fun. Like, it just sets you into a different world. It's the type of book that when I read it, I felt like I was there and I could visualize all the worlds that I was seeing, and it was really, really enjoyable. I love the way this author describes things. She's just a really fun, charismatic writer. And so there's a lot of jokes in here. There's a lot of humor. There's a lot of contrasting characters. So there's ones that are very sarcastic and very funny, and then there's others that are very serious. And there's just a lot of different things happening, and I really appreciate that. And there's vampires in this book somehow, and there's just so many different pieces. And I love the amount of fantasy that is in this, but it doesn't feel tacky. It feels very well done and very purposeful. I am someone, when it comes to fantasy, that I have troubles reading. I love fantasy, but it has to be done in a specific way, and it has to be in a way kind of like tasteful, if you will. Otherwise, I just don't enjoy it. This one I loved. This is like the perfect, like one of my perfect like fantasy worlds. The only reason why I'm giving it a little less of like a rating is that I do feel like there were parts in this book where I was kind of just like, there were some lines in the book that were almost kind of cringy, and I don't like when characters in books, especially when it's like, this is a romantasy, first of all. I don't think I said fantasy, but not romantasy. This is a romantasy. So there is a heavy plot where it's just like the plot, and then there's like the subplot of the relationship, which is a huge part of the book. And that's kind of like what the book's focus is around the main character's relationship. I really loved those two characters together, and I don't want to like say whose characters are, because so Sirius is the main character in both of those books, this one and the second book in the series, and then she falls in love with essentially this big scary fae soldier, right, who's like 1700 years old and like super attractive, and she's like a human, right? And so I do really love that. The only thing I will say is there are parts where once they get into like an actual relationship, they made me cringe. Like, it's just like one of those things where I'm like, oh, really? Did that need to be like a line in the book? Which like isn't the end of the world, and that's why I still think it's a 4.5 star. It was just one of those things where like reading it, I was like, oh, but then you like keep going, and like overall I still loved it. I still think it was funny. I did really enjoy it, and I think, again, I love the fact that there's a relationship in this book and it is a romantasy, but there's still like major aspects of a plot. Like, don't get me wrong, there's like intense things happening. There just happens to be a couple like fixing it and solving it, and they're the ones in the plot, if that makes sense. But there's lots of things happening. There's like, honestly, this is like a really action-packed book. One thing about Callie Hart is that she moves fast. And so I really, really enjoy this. I give it 4.5 stars. If you are a romantasy or even just fantasy reader, this is a really, really fun read. And it is, I think it's just over 600 pages. I read this guy in like 4 days. it's one of the, it reads really, really quick. It's not a challenging read by any means. It's just fun, and I love that for that. And there are some smut scenes. I have those tabbed in the bright pink. I think there's 3 true smut scenes and like 5-ish like romance scenes, if you will. And then obviously lots of flirting without it and things like that. And it is really, really fun. This one leaves on a major cliffhanger, so I was really glad that I waited to read it until the second book is out. And the second book is out now. And so 4.5 stars for this one. And then the next book in the saga, I think there's going to be either 3 or 4 books total. The second book, Brimstone, just came out, I think, at the end of November, I want to say. I think this guy came out in November. I think it was right around the time of Thanksgiving, if I remember right. And so I was really glad that I read this guy. And then I believe that there's going to be 3 or 4 books total. So if you want to wait to read them, you can. But I honestly would recommend reading them now. And then I always like doing rereads right before a series comes out. So that's what I recommend because it is really fun. This guy for me is I'm going to say like a 3.5 to 4 star. Like 4 star ish, but like barely a 4 star. And the reason why is because in comparison to the first one, this one to me isn't nearly as good. I had high hopes, I think, because I did love Quicksilver so much. And for this one, it just didn't hit as hard. This one is just a single POV. And then for this one, it's dual POV. And I don't necessarily like mind dual POVs, but I do think it's harder to execute for me. Like I'm a lot pickier when it comes to that. And I feel like I just didn't enjoy it as much as the first one, the way it was written. And this one it was interesting because for the first half of the book-ish, it felt very slow. Like so it continues on, obviously, the plot of the first one. And so it leaves on a cliffhanger, and this one picks up, I think it's set like a week after that happens. And so it picks up fairly quickly, and you're like, okay, we're getting a momentum, we're seeing what happens. But then it just starts getting really, really slow. And for like the first, I don't know, like 300-ish pages, it wasn't by any means like bland or like boring. It was just a lot slower paced than the first book. So that kind of caught me off guard. And I think because I loved the first one so much, it just didn't hit as hard as I had hoped. My expectations were really high. One of the things that I will say is that one of the side characters, but that's only because they weren't the 2 like main characters, is in the first book is a character named Carrion. I believe that's how you say his name. That's how I've been saying it, Carrion. And he is, I'm not going to give us any spoilers, but he's like, we'll say a friend of Sirius, who is the main character in both of the books. And the one thing that I did really, really love in this book, he wasn't like a huge character in the first one. Like there were definitely mentions of him and he's in it throughout it. But the thing that I really, really love about the second book that I liked more about the first one is the fact that he was more of a main character in this. And so I really enjoyed that. And I like the fact that like throughout both of the books, she does have a pet fox, which I really love. And I think that's really, really fun. And the fox actually becomes even more of a main character in this book as well. So I really do love the fact that in this book, the side characters got more of a main character like segment in the book and were more like prevalent in it and were more important to the plot. I think that was really, really a nice way to involve both plots into one and kind of mesh those 2 worlds. So I did really like that. And I like the fact that a lot of the things that were happening in the first book were resolved in this one. But I will say, I think it didn't hit for me until like the second-ish half of the book. And that's when it really picked up and it really got a lot better. And there are definitely a lot of cringy moments in this. Like they say, for example, like the main couple calls each other mates because they are technically like mates in this world. And so, and in like terms of mates, it means that like they're fated by the gods. Like that's like the whole concept. And so they are constantly referring to each other as mate. And it is a big thing in both of these books too, where the main fae guy that she essentially is in love with and who is Sirius's mate, he doesn't remember his like real name, like his given name by his mother, because his mother died before he could hear that, because he just goes by this different name that I'm not going to say. And one of the other things that really annoyed me is that at the end of the book, she ends up discovering what that name is, and he ends up remembering it. And then she, like, for whatever reason, does this like crazy switch up on him, and instead of calling him like the name that he's been going by for like the last over 1700 years, she switches up and starts calling him his like given name by his mother, which he like has never heard. And he's like he doesn't seem like he's like confused or insulted by that, but it's just kind of weird. And like the switch up from calling him, you know, one name in the last 1,000 pages of literature to all of a sudden in the last 30 only calling him by this new name and not even asking him first felt a little strange to me. Wasn't a huge fan of that. It just felt like weird and just very like, again, just kind of cringy. And I'm like, where did that come from? Like, girl, where is this energy coming from? And I almost kind of felt bad for him, because I was like, girl, did you even like ask if you wanted to be called that? Like, his whole name's been this other thing for 1700 years. Like, if someone started calling me just a new name, that would make me glitch. Like, I genuinely think I'd be scared. But aside from those things, I did really, really enjoy it. I do plan on reading the next one when it comes out next year, the third one in the series. Again, this one left on a huge, last like 30 pages of this book, so much shit happens, and it goes from feeling almost kind of slow at the beginning to very, very rushed towards the end, which kind of caught me off guard. And I was like, hold up, this could have been like, had you like made the first part like 100 pages like less, and then put the like more details in the last part and more explanations, that would have made a lot more sense to me. But that's not how it was written. So there's a lot to be anticipated for the third book, I will say, because there are lots of cliffhangers and just a lot of unfinished business in the last like literally like 30 pages of this book, where you're just like, it's thing after thing after thing. It's like never ending plot, and you're like, whoa, what the fuck is happening? Tons of revelations. So I am excited to see where book 3 goes. I really, really like these both. Again, this is like 4 stars. This is 4.5 to me. This one, in my opinion, is better than this one, but I still really loved this one. So I still recommend reading it. And I adore Carrion and his character. So the fact that he was more prevalent in this book, ate that up. All right, from there, I went ahead and read Alchemized, because I hate myself. Honestly, this book took me a while to read. It took me about 3-ish weeks to get through it. I took quite a few breaks just because it's very, very heavy. I do recommend looking up trigger warnings and stuff for this book, because there are a lot of heavier topics in this book, and it can be, as someone who hasn't experienced like a lot of what is in this book, I had moments where I just felt almost very like overwhelmed and very emotional and very, honestly, like unwell reading it. I think it's a very important book. Essentially, this book is about the main character, Helena, who is an alchemist and amidst a war. And so she ends up getting captured. The war is now over in present day, and she lost part of her memory at some point during the duration of the war, prior to the war. No one's really sure. She doesn't remember like much of anything from the war at all. And so she's sent to the High Reeve named Cain, whereas he is also an alchemist, but he can read people's minds essentially. So he is sent to uncover essentially whatever hidden memories she may have that is important to them to know, because they think that she's keeping secrets and that's why she can't remember. But no one really knows for sure, but they're like, oh, she has to be hiding something in that brain of hers if she's not sharing it, and if it's hidden in the first place and she all of a sudden can't remember. And so she's sent to him. And so there's a lot of talk about trauma, rape, and abuse and war topics, and it is really, really graphic. It is really, really heavy. I want to be really transparent about that. I think this book is incredible. It's very heavy, and it talks, again, I think when you're talking about certain topics, it's impossible for it not to feel like that. But it doesn't hold back at all. And I think that is really, really important. And I think in the world that we are living today, the author of this book did an incredible job tying in very relevant things and very unfortunately things that are happening in our modern day world. And so I think that this is a very important book to read, and I highly recommend it. This is a 5-star for me. I think it is beautiful. It is so painful, and it is so heavy, and there are moments of it that are actually beautiful, and there is a lot of emotion in this book. And so I do highly recommend it. Just be careful. The way that I recommend reading this book is it's in 3 separate parts. So it goes from present day, her past, and then it goes back to present day. What I did and what I recommend, because it's about 1,000 pages. It's a very thick book. The contents of it are not something that you're just gonna easy breezy read. It's not gonna be like a quickie little read. Like, no, this is a very intense, very heavy read. What I recommend doing is I read part 1, and then I went into part 2, and then once you read part 2, which is her past, you have a whole new perspective and understanding for part 1. And I highly recommend going back in time and reading part 1 and then going to part 3. I think it'll make it a lot more sense, and you'll see so many things that you didn't see when you first read part 1. So I highly recommend doing that, because there is a lot to digest and a lot of things that are kind of hard to comprehend and understand without context. When I read the part 1 originally, I was kind of like confused and kind of like had certain impressions of certain characters within the book and felt a certain way. Then I read part 2 and I was like, oh shoot, like there's a lot that, like, obviously she lost her memory, and a lot of things happened in that time when she didn't have that memory. And so I highly recommend going back in time and then going back to part 1, revisiting that. There's a whole new understanding and approach for the characters and her memories and what has happened in the years that they've been at war. And then going to part 3, it is, again, be careful reading it. Read it with your own, caution. And like, if you are not ready to like be able to digest this book, or if it's too triggering, that is okay. Just because it's popular to read it and because it is a good book doesn't mean that you have to read it. And so if it's not something that you think you can like handle, that is okay, because it is very, very heavy. And that's coming from someone who has never personally experienced the majority of things that happen in this book, and I still felt that way. So if you are someone who has currently experienced one of these things, I can't imagine how potentially triggering that would be. So just please use caution when reading it. But with that being said, I do think it is a very important read, and I think that it is very educational, and I think it was very beautifully done and very intentionally done. This book in every way, I would say, is perfect for like what the story is. Is it painful? Yes. I will say I've seen a lot of people calling this a love story. There is a subplot of what used to be a romance and what is now considered a relationship. I say that lightly because that is not the focus of the plot. That is like a subplot within the book, and it is a part of it, but that is a very, very, very small part of it. This is a war story. This is a trauma story. This is a story about politics and pain and heartbreak and just so many different things. The romance aspect of it, and I say romance very lightly, I would rather say like relationship, is very, very small. So just don't go into this thinking that you're getting like a romantasy or like something like that, because that is not what this is. This is a war story. It is painful. There happens to be a relationship in it, but it's not romantic by any means. Like, this relationship is not, the portrayal of it is not romantic. It's not cutesy. It's not gonna get you having butterflies. That is not it. It is devastating. And that is what Alchemized is. That is what it is intended to be. And it is beautiful and it is perfect, and I highly recommend it. But again, just know that it is all of those things. So just use caution. But with that being said, this is a 5-star for me. I've never read anything like this that is so well written and painfully disturbing. I highly recommend it. I think it's incredible. But again, I don't think that this is something that just anyone should go and read. So do with that information as you will. The next book that I read is the most recent one. I just finished this book yesterday. This book was really, really good. I also gave this book a 5-star. This is The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. If you watched my last video, like book review video, you saw that I read The Shepherd King duology by Rachel Gillig, and that was also a 5-star for me. I absolutely love Rachel Gillig's writing. She writes with so much emotion, and is just so delicate with her characters are so unique and they're so real and she does a really good describing them, and they're traumatized and they're real people and they have stories and they heal each other and they help each other and they love each other and it's just a very real story, if that makes sense. Like, yes, it is a fantasy world, this is romantasy, but the characters themselves feel like very real people, if that makes sense. So you have a way of like connecting with them and you can see yourself in those characters, and the things that they want are things that you want, and the things that they feel and their experiences. I feel like there's a lot of things that you can connect with them and you can feel it in yourself. I think that's part of the reason why Rachel Gillig's work is one of my favorites, is because she is so good at feeling those things and creating characters that make you feel that and see yourself and the people that you love in your own relationships and just different ways to connect. I feel like not a lot of authors achieve that for me. Rachel Gillig is one of those who does that, and she crushes it every time. I haven't read a single book by her that I don't like. This book, I believe, is going to be either a duology or a series. The next one comes out in a little less than a year. So this does leave on a cliffhanger. And I am planning wholeheartedly to read the second one. I'm really looking forward to it. This book for me was a 5-star. Something else that I really like about this book is that the side characters are never just side characters, if that makes sense. They're very much hold just the same amount of weight, if not more, as the main characters, which I feel like is very rare to create a book where the side characters feel like that. One of the main characters is a gargoyle, who is like considered the side character, and his character is just so witty and so cute, and so you just want to kind of like give him a hug. And he's very emotional and he has a very specific personality, and by the time you get to, you know, a little over halfway, well, no, closer to the end of the book, I'd say in like the second quarter, you learn so much about his character and these other side characters and why the way that they are. And there's a lot of healing that is done in this book, in this relationship that is portrayed in this book. They heal each other and they heal each other's souls and their emotions, and I think that's really a beautiful thing, and I think it's a very important message to be with someone who does that for you. That's what a relationship should be. And so I really, really loved the portrayal of that book, and I love the side characters. I love the gargoyle so much. He's one of my favorite characters ever. I adore him so much. And I'm really looking forward to reading the second book in the series. But that is everything that I went ahead and read the last couple months, November through December. I did quite a bit of reading. I feel like a lot of the books that I read were thicker, and so they took me a lot more time to get through. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, please feel free to give this a thumbs up and subscribe. It helps me out a ton. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.